you're allowing.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what. We'll go unusual. You start.
Oh, wow. You got to give me a moment's notice here so I can queue up my story.
All right.
Let's start with the easy one.
Yes.
So it's something, you and I have, all of us have been debating for quite some time. But apparently, an Australian court has now ruled on a very controversial subject. Apparently, they've already, this landmark case asks, what is a woman? And in Australia, they have determined that although Roxanne Tickle had not been directly discriminated against, she was a victim of indirect discrimination, refers to a decision disadvantages a person with a particular attribute and ordered the app to pay her £10,000. Apparently, she was banned from a woman-only social media app because she actually was a man. And the court the name of the app was called Giggle for Girls. Just so you know, I've never heard of it.
Gee, really?
Yeah, but now we have precedents in Australia. Now I don't spend much time on GFG, but apparently it was worth $10,000 because she could not prove she was a woman, and now she is.
No, the court doesn't make that determination.
Well, yeah, are you sure about this?
I am very sure that, once again, you're debating. I mean, they're dealing with something that is has nothing to do with how you feel.
Well, the good news is she originally wanted $200,000, claiming that I guess the CEO, some Sal Grover, was persistently misgendering, prompted constant anxiety and occasional suicidal thoughts. Now, I don't mean to be cruel, but it's been my experience that the suicidal thoughts, well, don't we actually have, start way before they get misgendered? In fact, don't we have studies to say that the suicide rate goes up after these, shall we say, surgeries?
Well, again, this is Australia, not here. But I would ask, which I would ask here, if you are upset, offended, insulted by something, do you have a constitutional right to not be offended? And if so, where is it? I mean, I guess in a way that's the other side of free speech. Again, not being threatening, not being, not willing to talk about hurting somebody, but I don't agree with you. Well, that hurts your feelings. And therefore, I'm guilty of hurting your feelings because your feelings are constitutionally protected, right?
Well, you went the constitutional route, and I was going to go the psychiatric route. If you're if somebody calling you a name causes you to commit suicide, I'm suggesting there's some mental illness there already. If you don't if you claim to be something you're not, there's a little bit of mental illness. And if you're rewarding mental illness in the form of legal rulings and lawsuits, are you not encouraging more mental illness?
You're definitely supporting it, and supporting it in not a good, positive way. Supporting it would be help them.
Yeah, well, given the amount of mental ill we have in this country, by the way, it used to be defined, I think it's time to have a conversation about bringing back some mental institutions and hopefully get it right this time because there's some whack people out there. So it's a perfect story for wackadoodle news.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it part of it is sad that this is going on and that you had a court weigh in on this. I mean, that doesn't solve the problem. Okay, if you, and I'm not saying you would, but if you accidentally ram my car, cash is going to fix the problem because I'm going to get my car repaired. How does cash fix this problem? It doesn't. But it does encourage more of it. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'd like to just take this one a step further, if I may.
Please.
So I like to look at the causes of this mass mental illness going on all over the Western world. Um, and if you research it deeply, you find it all comes from a place called the Tavistock Institute in London.
Mm.
Came about in the early part, in the progressive area, in the early part of the 20th century. Tavistock Institute was founded to do what's called social engineering. They in London, they actually had to get shut down from all of their gender affirming surgery just last year because apparently the Brits got it right. They realized how much damage is being done. But throughout the rest of the British Commonwealth and former colonies, also known as the United States of America, this is still alive and well in many places. But this has a direct source, and it was done for a reason. This is all part of the globalism, one world order. They're trying to weaken Western society. My question is, why do you think that is?
That was going to be my next question is given what we see is going on, what's happening, what is the end game?
Well, so you trace the people from the philosophical roots of the Tavistock Institute, and it goes back to Malthus and even further. And for those who don't know who Thomas Malthus was, he's the philosophical forefather of a lot of the most wicked philosophers, including Karl Marx, that we've seen over the last few hundred years. It's a depopulation theory. It's going back to feudalism theory, where the elites want to go back to feudalism, where you have the lords and the peasants, and they just can't stand a middle class. So they've been trying to weaken us by one shape or another, and that's a 10-hour show all in of itself. But this is just another example of it, and it's pervasive throughout the Western world. You won't find this stuff in China. You won't find this in Japan. You won't find it in Africa. Well, you may find a little bit there. You're not finding it much in South America. It is a Western creation, and it is engineered.
And it doesn't seem that it is improving the world.
No, these are the same people that want to talk about global warming. It's resource shortages, all that stuff. They want to hoard it all the resources for themselves. It's all part of the same game plan. But this one we can specifically trace to the Tavistock Institute, and they've been shut down. So there's good news.
That's good news.
Yeah.
That is definitely wackadoodle. What else?
Well, here's a fun one that should make you sleep well at night.
Oh, gee.
Give me 1 second. I got the share ready.
Yeah.
We have a German state media broadcaster that has developed a virtual reality game in which players shoot lasers. Here you go, this Alan. Here's where you come in at flying climate denialists, and perhaps the most eccentric effort to propagandize teenagers known to man. So this is a video of it. There's a new video game where the player runs around and you shoot people that deny climate change. And this is actually on the market.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. And apparently, I was told that this is one of about a dozen such games. This is literally true. This thing really exists. It will be released to the public sometime in the autumn. The Steam page is here. In the meantime, they set up a whole stand to debut this lunacy at Gamescom, the Cologne video game trade fair. Any thoughts?
Well, that's very sad. First of all, it's interesting. It's okay to promote what in essence is attack and shoot if it's a video game to children, to teenagers. But want to teach them how to handle a firearm, well, that's just crazy. I mean, what is the purpose of engaging in these type of games? And we're not talking a theoretical target like whatever, say aliens, on and on and on. We're talking about targeting people who have a different point of view, attitude about one topic. That almost legitimizes the attack on them. What do you think?
Well, I think there's absolutely, once again, we're talking about social engineering, social programming, and why do this? I mean, I don't want censorship, but we know that radio, television, video games, music, the movies, all of it, especially Hollywood, has all been part of this whole programming, social engineering exercise. And once again, why are they doing it? In this particular case, it's to push a specific agenda. If you don't believe in our climate religion, you probably should be killed. And we see that same kind of rhetoric on other people who disagree with people politically, and that's just not sane or rational. But that's what we're dealing with. And I bring these up, and I bring up the deeper points, because to think this is just a political difference between they want big government and we want small government is missing the point. They want totalitarianism and us dead.
Yeah, that's again, I get the games where you're fighting aliens or, something out of a dungeon, whatever. I get that. But when you put the political slant to this and you're demonizing people who don't agree with a certain perspective.
Well, yeah, you take this further. You look at rap music, and it turns out that the CIA was involved in infiltrating the rap music industry, throughout, and they promoted drugs and violence. Same CIA that we know were pushing drugs into the inner cities going as far back as the 1960s. It's part of a bigger plan. This stuff didn't happen by accident. People are not this inherently stupid. These ideas had to be thrown to them. It's just like our textbooks, our school books were printed, like 52% of them were printed by a company that was owned by Robert Maxwell, the sponsor of Jeffrey Epstein, father of Ghislaine Maxwell, who's a Mossad operative. It's a century plus movement to completely destroy Western civilization. And I ask you once again, why?
Why? Well, you only want to do that if you don't like it.
Yeah. And the only thing I can think, yeah.
And if you don't like it, why do you not like it? Because it's about people living their life the way they want to.
It's about resources, Alan. They want the resources for themselves. They want to be the ruling class. They do not like us because we're basically, the real story, taking a centuries long look, is, after the Gutenberg press was invented, the whole aristocracy crumbled as people were able to have the free exchange of information between one another. And out of that came the Reformation and the Renaissance. And we had these great thinkers in the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries, which led to a school of thought that held things like individual liberty, free trade, and being self-determination were important. Well, that doesn't work very well if you're part of the ruling class. And we got the revolution of 1776, and these elites, if you want to use that word, have been trying to get their power back ever since. And they are very good at using the tools of government and corporate power to attack us. That's what they want. They want to go back to the rulers and the serfs, and it's a resource war. And you can see it. Everything about colonialism was about getting the resources under them. And so I think it's important that we talk about why they're doing it. This is not a 10-year phenomenon. It's a centuries-long phenomenon.
Well, the Gutenberg Bible apparently was published first time February 23rd, 1455. We're coming up to almost 600 years. But look what happened post publication, as you're talking about 15, 16, 1700s. Look how long it took. And kind of incremental encroachment that'll happen. People started becoming educated. There was a point to reading. You just didn't listen to the authorities to tell you the way to live. And sometimes I think about England. You had the monarchy, you had the aristocracy, which was definitely a step above being a subject. The regular people were subjects. And then the lowest class were serfs. And what distinguished a serf from a subject is that, so I know it, a serf belonged to the land. If one person sold the land, the serfs went with it. Imagine that kind of life. You were told you belong to the land. That's almost like being an animal.
So you really,
but they justified it. They accepted it.
well, survival was all they could, when you're living, talk about people living paycheck to paycheck here, they're living meal to meal. That's the way Western world was for, a couple thousand years, if you were not one of the privileged few. But you really queued me up for one of my favorite arguments.
Okay.
One of the things that happened in the 1600s was the emergence of a fourth class of people. Originally you had the noble class, you had the Praetorian Guard, which would have been lords, and of course you had the peasants. The fourth class emerged. It was a commercial class in the 1600s. And this was started with like the Dutch East India Company, but more importantly, the British East India Company, where you had these multinational corporations using common stock to accumulate capital so they could actually build a lot more ships and go to a lot more places, exploiting the resources all over the world to the point that England became the empire where the sun never set. But all the wealth was in the hands of this merchant class. This is mercantilism. They inherited it from the Venetians, who inherited it from the Romans. Well, they brought it to England, this entire concept, and they, put it on steroids once they had that banking system, dual entry banking system, the ability to leverage finance. It's the reason they beat the rest of Europe in industrialization. It's they could accumulate capital faster. Well, this is the mercantilist system our founding fathers came here to get away from, and lasted about 2 years. We stayed away from it, and that's when we got the first Bank of the United States, and we've been fighting that battle ever since. This is all part of the same picture, but these are the ruling class. It's not just those who are born in nobility. You can be someone like a Rockefeller, whose father, although he was an opium pusher, he was going from town to town, and he built his billions on his own. But he's, perhaps the most influential person of the last 200 years that nobody ever talks about. But he's part of the elite class, the ruling class. And you remember the Georgia Guidestones? They told us what they wanted to do. This is straight Malthusian, population control. And they said in their own words, they would think the world would be better if there's only about 500 million people left. Well, I'm not good at math or anything like that, Alan, but to me, that seems like we got to kill about 7 or 8 billion people to get to that number.
Let's say 7.5.
Okay, so does it make sense that those people that want that population number would try to get us to change our sexes, abort our children, poison our food, put us on lifelong, chemical, pharmaceuticals? Does it make a bit of sense that that's part of the plot?
Part of the plan.
And call me crazy if you think I'm on base with any of this stuff, but all the points seem to line up.
Well, don't say this in Australia because you'll probably get sued.
I don't plan on going there anytime soon. They gave up free speech during COVID.
They gave up a lot more, which is very surprising for me that happened there.
You wouldn't have thought so. I know a lot of I used to be a rugby player. I knew a lot of Australians. And you would have thought, a lot of them live in San Diego because the climate's so similar, but they're some of the most fun-loving, freedom-loving people I've ever met. But they got during COVID. I thought they had one of the worst performances of anybody outside of California.
Absolutely. From the news I saw, including creating the camps where people were taken.
So let me give you my my last wackadoodle news story because it's the same topic, and it's good news. If I may.
Bring it. Absolutely.
Well, I told you, got probably on the show last year that Vanguard, State Street, and who am I missing here?
BlackRock, Blackstone.
Thank you. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. The huge people, fund companies, asset management companies that were pushing all the DEI were closing down their DEI funds.
Just to be clear, explain what those 3 letters mean.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you.
Basically, they're using the power of the stock market to enforce woke philosophy, the same garbage we're talking about, onto corporations and forcing their people into corporate boards of directors, and they're changing their policies. That's why you see things like Target and Budweiser going all woke. That's where it came from. They shut down those funds. They probably come back and rebrand it, but we have another example of the pushback succeeding. The death of DEI is finally here, and it's a joy to behold. I'm starting to get sick of that word joy. Harley Davidson has basically ended its DEI strategies, and I mentioned Jack Daniels as well. So a lot of
why don't you start at that paragraph right above?
right here?
No, come down. No, right above Harley Davidson is just ditched. That paragraph.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a radical progressive ideology that in recent years has held countless Western institutions in its miserable grip. That's well written. This week, however, there have been multiple signs that all of a sudden the grip is loosening. Harley Davidson just ditched its diversity targets. Jack Daniels, too. The University of Kentucky has said it's disbanding its diversity office. Meanwhile, meritocracy has been restored to the admissions process at elite U.S. universities. New figures show that since race-based affirmative action was banned by the Supreme Court, the proportion of Asian American students at MIT has shot up, while that of African American students has slumped. This is the trouble with affirmative action. While benefiting one minority, it can unwittingly penalize another. Of course, all these examples are from the US, but since these days, British elites slavishly follow all of its American trends. This is a British, Daily Skeptic is a British newspaper. DEI must be doomed over here too. Last paragraph I'll read. The most pernicious element of DEI is surely equity. The idea that inequality of outcomes between groups can be explained by injustice, can only be explained by injustice. Is this true? It's just that in the men's 100-meter Olympic final, not one runner was white. Presumably, this means white runners are victims of injustice and should have been included in the final via affirmative action. Still, now DEI is dying. I suppose they'll just have to run faster instead.
Well, for me, this push for DEI, has been in the marketplace and in corporate life. But it's very not there in one very specific place: professional sports. No one is calling for that in professional sports, are they?
Only in the coaching ranks.
Well, not on the floor, not on the field.
No, but did you know the NFL has actually put in a rule a long time ago, like more than a decade ago, that you can't hire a new coach unless you interview at least one minority?
When what really matters is the end result, which is a high quality production, high quality product, high quality service. What matters is who can do that, who can provide the service, who can provide the item. And my thought is, if everybody knew that when you go to the race, everybody's going to finish at the same time because they're going to make it so everybody gets first place, how hard are you going to train? You're not. What's the purpose? You don't have to compete. And that's the negative of this, which is you don't have to compete. You don't have to work hard, which means we are not encouraging people to do the best they can. And that's not good for anybody, except whoever's controlling.
No, and you're making the fundamental argument of collectivism versus meritocracy. And this country was founded to be a meritocracy.
Explain that word.
Meritocracy.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do it, you'll probably be rewarded. If you do it and do it well, you'll be rewarded. If you can't do it that well, don't expect to be rewarded.
So you don't get a first place ribbon for showing up?
No, you don't even get a participation trophy in my world.
There you go. Because you know you participated. That's enough.
It's a great
Great
point.
stories.
Well, I wasn't expecting to go first, but there's a theme between those three, and I figured it kind of ties into the theme you've been spouting out for the last couple of years here. So there you have it.